Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to my channel. Today we're doing a wrap-up for October 2022. It felt like a sluggish month of reading. I had such ambition, but a number of factors kind of knocked me off my reading schedule. Things were especially busy with kids. My whole household has been sick for what seems like the entire month. Well, no, it seems like it because it's true. The entire month we've been sick. I don't know what it is about elementary school kids, but they bring home one thing, and then as soon as you're just about recovered from that, they bring home the next thing. I swear I'm going to send them in a bubble. Even though I didn't get to as many books as I thought I might have a chance to, I still enjoyed my time with the ones that I did, and got through a couple tomes. First thing I read, which I immediately posted a review for because it surprised me how much I liked it, was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This one was an impulse read. It became available at my library, and I was in the middle of a couple of other denser things and thought, this is perfect. It's the breath of fresh air that I need so that I can get into Malazan. The book was delightful. Based on everything I'd heard about it, I really was expecting something that lacked some sort of external plot, like it was just more of the day in the life of. And that's very much a big component to it. And if you are like me and love shows like renovation shows or even cooking competitions or like even business success stories, podcasts, things like that, then this will totally appeal to you. But it was actually very well done. The writing was great. There were a lot of really slow, poignant moments that I think really made the story special. And so I think that's why people are coming out of it so excited about it, because not only is it fun, but it actually makes you feel something. And the external plot was just enough to keep things interesting and like more expansive than it could have been. Quite liked that one. Picked up Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's the second book in the Children of Time series. Now, Children of Time, favorite book of the year so far still. Still holds that spot. Loved it so much. Almost DNF to this one at 85%. What? What happened? I really love the ideas in this one, and the biological components were every bit as good as the first book. The difference is kind of execution stuff. So we do follow a few characters from here that were in the previous book, but instead of really taking time to enmesh with them, it's more like, hey, these are characters we've met before. And we're basically going to have them stand around talking and theorizing the whole time instead of really like getting into the core of their being like we did in the first set. And then you have a whole cast of new POVs. And that was the most interesting part for me. And the main reason I kept reading and wanting to know more about them. But, very loosely, this is about octopods, which is the plural for octopus. I always thought it was octopi, but evidently octopods is the correct way to say it. Octopods, by nature, are so very alien from the way that we function. And so the way that they were presented in the story was incredibly, realistic and organic, but it wasn't very relatable. And so I think there was a little bit of a disconnect there. But I also think I could have found more of a connection had it been written slightly differently, because there was so many instances where there would be in-the-moment plot progression with plenty of dialogue or communication, and then it would step back and do a whole bunch of infodump explanations about that. And in this context, the infodumps are really interesting, but it stopped momentum, and at some point I just lost track of what was going on, and not because it was confusing, but because I was just losing interest, and I felt like I was forcing myself through it. And incidentally, by the end of the book, I did end up finishing it, but it was just because I sped. Went so fast. I was initially all fired up to dive into the third book ASAP, but now I think I'm going to wait a little bit. It's so bizarre to me how big of a contrast there is between the first book and the second book. And there's nothing offensively wrong about this book. It just didn't sing to me. I think I'm coming in at a 2 out of 5 stars. It was just okay. I picked up House of Chains by Steven Erikson, book 4 in the Malazan series, and as you can see, I am still reading it. I had ambition to finish this book within a month, but this one is so dense. The first, quarter of it wasn't too terribly dense. I actually kind of flew through that, but then I hit the point with a whole bunch of POVs and trying to reacclimate, remember who's who, and it's just slowed down to like a snail's pace, like maybe a couple of pages a day. And when you have a 1,000-page book, a couple pages a day is really daunting. Like, you can't get further than that. Anyway, I'm about 30% through, still really enjoying the series. And yeah, hopefully I'll finish it by the end of the year. While I was in the middle of that dense read, I got in the mail an early copy of Lost in the Moment and Found by Shanann McGuire. Book 8, I believe, in the Wayward Children, 7 or 8. And it was so cool to get this in the mail, and I decided to just like read a chapter. Like, I'm just gonna read a chapter here and there and see how it goes. Yeah, I ended up throwing all my reading plans out the window and just finishing it in a couple of days. This is not my favorite Wayward Children book so far, but it is darn close. Like, maybe second favorite. Really enjoyed this one. I usually don't like spoilers in books, but the author's note at the very beginning of this one gave an indication of what was to come and a little bit of a trigger warning. And I really appreciated that because I thought it added a surprising amount of depth to the story. And unlike some of the books, I found the portal aspect, the different world that we got to visit, as equally interesting as Before They Left, because the novellas are usually separated into kind of 2 parts. And I loved where we went. I thought it was such a cool place. I'm hoping we get to go back at some point. The whole thing was imaginative and magical, and my only complaint is that it's such a short book. I would have loved to have spent more time there. So some really hard to read themes, but some very profound things and some cool ideas and great momentum, great writing, story building. I loved everything about this one. I'm glad I kind of dropped everything for a couple of days to immerse in it. 4 out of 5 star, maybe a little better, somewhere in that range. And for Patreon Book Club, we read Jade City by Fonda Lee. I'm glad I finally had a chance to get around to this one. And I gotta say, you know, I think I'm coming in at about a 3 star on it. Like, I liked it. I didn't love it. I found the characters were really interesting. I like the idea for the society. I especially love the writing. And I love it when authors bring their outside of writing expertise to their stories. And it's clear that Fonda Lee used her legal background to really enhance the ideas in the story. When you hear about a book for so long, you start to formulate these certain expectations of what you're going to find in the contents. And one of the reasons that I didn't pick this one up for so long, I heard it was very like Godfather-esque. I knew it was Asian fantasy. And most of the Asian fantasy I've read over the last couple of years have been incredibly brutal. And so I was braced going in. I stalled on reading it because I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that many gut punches right now. I was expecting it to be incredibly graphic and visceral, and it was none of those things. In fact, it was almost on this side of vanilla when it came to the level of description. So this is by no means even close to like a grimdark thing. And by the way, there's a time and place where just even the ideas of some of the things that happened in here would have really bothered me and made me squeamish, but I've been reading way too much grimdark. So I'm like, meh, this one was just fine. Anyway, I thought it would be more gritty. And if I had one criticism about it, I think it needed a little bit more grit. It was very much more of a white collar battle than it was like down in the streets like I thought it would be. But that being said, still really interesting. And I have a feeling that the specialness of this series is not necessarily tied to the first book, but more of a series as a whole with really good momentum, and people come away from it feeling so excited about it. So I'm willing to keep reading and see if I like the next ones even better. I also picked up a couple of books for Project Urban Fantasy, but you'll find out more about that when I post that video. In my Tackling the TBR post, I asked y'all if you'd prefer if I kept books that I'm reading for projects like Read Burn Hoard and other challenges that I've got going on a secret until the video goes live, or if you want me to announce them as I'm doing these wrap-ups and TBRs. And while everybody was super supportive, as in like whatever you choose to do we'll be okay with, it was very clear that the preference was keeping those types of things a surprise. So yeah, I read a couple of urban fantasy books this month for Project Urban Fantasy, but I'll keep those under wraps until the video goes live in a couple of weeks. I also picked up a couple of nonfiction this month. It's funny, during the time frame when I was most ill, I was trying to read House of Chains, which requires a lot of concentration, and you really don't want a foggy mind for that. And I was also in the middle of Children of Ruin. And so there were nights where I really wanted to listen to something, but just did not have the concentration available for those type of dense reads. So I'm like, great, I'll go through my Audible library and turn on a couple of random nonfiction books just to keep myself entertained, ones that didn't require a ton of concentration. The first one I tried was called Joy of Less. It's a decluttering book, kind of like an approach to minimalism and why you should consider it kind of thing. I had a couple of issues with this book. When I was debating on whether or not to pick it up on a sale, I read a couple of reviews, and the overwhelming response was, this is kind of too simple if you're further along in your decluttering journey. But I'm always willing to listen to stuff like that because you never know where you're going to pick up something new. But that was not my objection to it. My objection to it is that the author, in my opinion, had an entire book showcasing what it would be like to take this process way too far. Throughout the entire book, she promotes this like constant vigilance attitude where you've got to be on guard to keep your house perfect at all times. So before you leave a room, make sure you're scanning around and make sure that nothing is out of place. If someone leaves something in a room that they're not supposed to, make sure you send it back to their room quite away. If you notice things on the floor, pick them up right away. Everything is focused on your entire life revolving around keeping your space perfect. And I don't know about you, but my intention for this whole journey is to free myself up from having to worry about stuff like that. So to get to a point where everything has a home and I'm not constantly managing my stuff. Now I realize that on a day-to-day basis, there's going to be things you're going to have to spend a little more time on because things aren't going to be perfect, especially if you live with other people. But the whole point of this for me is I don't want my world to revolve around that. I want it to be when I'm ready to tackle some things that have gotten a little out of hand, it doesn't take me 3 days. It only takes me like 15 minutes. Capiche? And she presented it in a way that I felt was very unhealthy, and in a way that would only appeal to other perfectionists. So when she's suggesting doing all of these constant maintenance things, if you're already a perfectionist, then chances are you are already doing these things. Like you are processing your mail immediately when you get it home. You're picking your clothes up off the floor. You're putting things back after you use them. But the way she's presenting it makes it sound as if she thinks that type of advice will work for everybody. To me, like telling someone who's struggling with organization, like, well, have you tried being more organized? Is like telling a depressed person, well, have you tried being more happy? Because all you have to do is be happy and then everything is solved. It was slightly toxic. So even though I had some objections to it, in a way it was really good for me to read because I have that type of obsessive personality that could very well allow myself to take this process to extremes. And in fact, I think honestly, whenever I see a video of someone who has like 5 possessions as a minimalist, my first thought is they're in that obsessive cycle where it wasn't perfect until they were literally down to nothing. And as you can see by my book collection, I don't want to be down to nothing. I just want to be down to like the most special things. And I will give her this, there was a section in there on how to deal with decluttering with kids throughout varying ages, and I found that actually quite helpful, so not all a bust. Interesting book, okay read. I've read a bunch that I liked a lot more. And in fact, when I finished that one, I thought, I need something that'll inspire me a little more because I didn't get what I wanted out of that title. So I decided to reread Outer Order, Inner Calm by Gretchen Rubin. And this one, I really like this one. It's one of those kind of, she will take some time to expand on some things, but for the most part, the book is like little unelaborated snapshots of different things that you can try and think about doing. Actionable plans for how to make your life feel less chaotic. And because this was my second time reading it and I got so much out of it, I decided I'm probably going to pick up a physical copy of it because I really enjoy this book. It's good inspiration, it's good food for thought, it's good to turn on when you need a little bit of motivation, even if you've heard the information before. And what I like most is her added perspective, not only to like the ideas she's presenting, but like the whys behind it. Love that one. And then randomly I had an Audible freebie called The Burnout Generation. And I'm not struggling with burnout currently, but I could see how I could get to that point pretty easily if I wasn't managing things. And I was expecting Well, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got. She starts out referring to this article she wrote that got a ton of views. And she does start out with some credibility. Evidently, she has a PhD. And the problem is, though, in this book, she never actually tells you what the article said. You don't get to hear about the article. So I guess if you want to go find the article and read it, great. And I'm sure it's probably like ownership issues, like she cannot make money off of that through this because they've got all the rights to it, whoever published it, whatever. So lacking the article, she talked about what the article did for her and how much response from readers she got, and from that spurred a podcast, and this is a collection of podcast interviews. And I found it interesting, but I didn't find it like earth-shattering. It was basically just people reaffirming, yeah, burnout's a thing, I have it, that's it. And you do get a little bit of perspective on why these particular people have burnout. I found the religious leader's story the most compelling. Nothing in here will offer you much insight or give you any solutions. It's mostly just like testimonials. So 2 hours of my life. I don't totally regret picking it up, but at least now I can check it off the Audible or to read list. That's everything. It's been kind of a whirlwind of a month. It went really fast, but at the same time, when you're sick, everything just seems to drag too. So I'm not quite sure how the math works on that. Anyway, let me know what you've been reading this month. Anything especially fun? Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.